For just $1,000 at Serendipity 3, an upscale New York City restaurant, you can order something called the Golden Opulence Sundae. The dessert contains Tahitian vanilla ice, cream infused with Madagascar vanilla beans, and chunks of rare Chihuahua chocolate from Venezuela. Oh, and the big ingredient, it's also covered with a 23-karat edible gold leaf. You know that commercial where the guy with the miniature giraffe says, "Opulence, I has it"? Okay, besides the obvious question about why you would spend $1,000 on ice cream, I'm not judging here. How is it that a human being can eat and digest something made of gold or silver? Isn't that even possible? Hopefully when we finish this episode of the Knife and Fork Show, we'll know the answer to that question. Joining us today is Dr. Marcus Lipp, Director of Food Standards for the United States Pharmacopoeia Convention, known as USP for short. Dr. Lipp, let's talk a little bit about USP. What do you guys do, and what role do you play in the food industry, and especially in relation to the FDA?
USP is a non-for-profit independent organization with a mission to further public health, and we do that by setting quality standards that define the purity and the authenticity of food ingredient, of dietary supplement ingredients, and of pharmaceutical ingredients. So the description of what an ingredient is supposed to be, of what it really is codified in our compendia, as we call our books. It's the numbers that you can get out of a laboratory, the tests that a laboratory can perform, and also reference materials to support the actual performance of that test, that it's executed correctly.
So how would the food industry interact with your information?
We develop monographs, or these quality standards, we're calling them monographs, in collaboration with food industry and with other stakeholders, to accurately describe food ingredients for what they are supposed to be, for what they really are.
Right.
The unique ability there is then to have a description that is publicly available, a method to verify any compliance with our specifications that are publicly available, so everybody in the food supply chain can independently test and verify the compliance with FCC specifications, thus maintaining product integrity and product safety.
I want to come back to the FCC in a second, but one of the things that surprised me is how big your operation actually is. It's not just one office in the United States. You have offices all over the world, don't you? How many offices, how many people do you employ?
Yeah, USP is a fairly unique non-for-profit in its size and scope. We are headquartered in Rockwell, that's outside Washington, D.C., but we are on 4 continents. We have a total of around 850 people employed. 200 to 300 are actually in laboratories, are chemists, are analysts, and those laboratories are very well equipped on top of it.
Let's come back to the FCC, which is the acronym for the Food Chemicals Codex.
Correct.
How many different food ingredients are in the Food Chemicals Codex today? Do you have that number memorized?
I have an approximation memorized.
Okay,
It's a little over 1,200 different food ingredients that are codified in the Food Chemicals Codex.
And if I were to look at one of those ingredients, what would I typically see? How would it look?
It's a description of the ingredient, so what is it supposed to be used for, how does it look like, is it a white powder, is it a liquid, maybe some odor characteristics,
Sure.
And melting points, and some very basic characteristics. And then there is a set of specifications that vary from ingredient to ingredient, and a detailed description of the analytical tests that can be performed to check for compliance with those specifications.
Does the Food Chemical Codex ever make its way into GRAS applications in any way? Does it interact with the process of getting GRAS approval?
The Food Chemicals Codex can be used and is used by industry for specifying a food ingredient. Now that can be in contractual terms, that a purchaser says, I would like to purchase a certain food ingredient with the specification as laid out in the Food Chemicals Codex. And it can also be used and is being used for regulatory approvals that the food ingredients is described as per the specifications in the Food Chemicals Codex.
Okay. Now we had this massive law get passed a little while ago, the FDA Food Safety Modernization Act. And I've heard it said that as a result of FSMA, this Food Chemical Codex will be even more important than it was before. Why is that?
I think the Food Chemicals Codex and its ability to define food ingredients for their purity and identity can help maintain integrity of food supply chains. Now, part of the FSMA regulations will be food ingredients and the verification of food ingredients. Not many details are known as of today, but it is perceivable that specifications as laid out in the Food Chemicals Codex may play a stronger role in the future.
FCC gets updated every so often. How often is it?
FCC gets updated every 6 months.
Every 6 months. And in the most recent update that you made public, there were 29 different ingredients that were either added or updated.
Correct.
And it included some interesting ones. One was glycosides. You have more practice of saying these words than I do, I'm sure. Talk a little bit about what happened to stevioglycosides.
Stevioglycosides is an interesting one. It's a sweetener. So it's a non-caloric sweetener. It's plant-derived, so it's often marketed as a natural sweetener. And hence differentiate sales from so-called synthetic sweeteners, but non-caloric, so it has an attraction for consumers. Now, stevioglycosides are derivatives from plants. Stevia is a plant that's native to South America, but also in the meanwhile grown in China. And so it's extracted from leaves out of this plant and purified. And hence there is the challenge how to describe these materials characteristically. There's actually a mixture of components that occur to various degrees, and so the accurate classification will help the integrity, maintain the integrity of that product and prevent adulteration.
I wanted to ask you about a couple, but we're running along on time, so I'm going to skip to my favorite one.
Sure.
The gold and silver foil. How can you consume gold and silver foil? Can you digest it?
Well, there's consuming and digestion. We can consume by just eating it, as in the sundae that you mentioned in your lead-up. So it is just swallowed as anything else. The foils actually, or the little glitter particles, are very, very thin. They're used and they're purely decorative. They have no physiological functions. They get not metabolized by the body. So it just passes through.
They don't get hung up in the intestines or anything like that?
No, there's
no
known risk.
No. I'm a little uncomfortable eating that kind of thing, I think, myself.
Well, it's I can understand, but it's for decorative reasons, and in certain cultures it's actually very common to use that for sweets as celebratory decoration, and obviously then here in this example it was ice cream.
Well, that's all for this segment, but stick around because Dr. Marcus Slip is coming back soon to talk about another issue that involves USP, the Food Fraud Database. Now, who's taking me to Serendipity for this golden opulence, and could you put my gold foil on the side, please?